next slot on our Congress. It's the ESG Sustainability panel, and let me introduce to you the moderator of this panel, Johanna Levy. I think this is the right pronunciation. She's Vice President of ESG, and ESG, as you all know, is Environmental, Social, and Governance at the GIA, the Gemological Institute of America. She has a 15-year experience leading with international companies on this subject. So, ladies and gentlemen, a warm applause to you. And I don't know if you want the other panelists to join us on stage.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So now the floor is yours.
Absolutely. So Aaron, Marcelo, and then Rui will
Where
be
do you
the
want
three
me to
panelists.
sit?
I'll sit close by.
Okay,
Do you
so
have
the tracker.
to move the slides?
Okay,
Yes.
do we have that special thing? So, oh, it's you. I never sit next to her, so you are colleagues. So, yes. Oh, by the way, I'm here also. I don't need.
Thank you. So, Johanna Levy, VP SGS GIA. You all know GIA. I come from the fragrance industry, joined this wonderful industry and this wonderful organization 5 months ago. And I'm delighted to talk to you about not only ESG, but ESG initiatives in the supply chain. So I will go fast on the definition because Elle just defined it. And I will do a little bit of a deep dive into data, but so data for this industry. So a very adjacent industry, the fashion industry, according to McKinsey, says that sustainability is the biggest business opportunity in 2023. And then going back to jewelry industry, the jewelry industry specifically, 45% of 18 to 39-year-old talked to their jeweler about sustainability. And that's a big increase versus the older consumers, only 34% of 40 to 65-year-old. And again, going back to McKinsey, they see that 20 to 30% of purchases will be driven by sustainability by 2025. So echoing on what Elle just said, sustainability makes business sense. But how to define it? And more accurately, how do consumers define it? And they don't know yet. So 54% think that mines being environmentally responsible is one of the top 3 things to do in sustainability, but only 25% think about governance and anti-corruption. And then when we move those questions to retailers, well, retailers think that in their supply chain, the biggest issue is packaging waste. So there is a misconnection here, a misalignment on what consumer thinks, what retailers do, and what's really happening in the supply chain. So how to really move forward with that, with all those complicating notions? Well, there are some frameworks that exist. Maybe too many, and that's what the 70% means. 79% of executives, again, in the fashion industry feel completely overwhelmed by the numerous frameworks. However, those frameworks are very often the same. So if you want to follow RJC, it's very much aligned with the OECD framework. Same thing with the Responsible Mining Initiative. And some of other frameworks, like ISO, EcoVadis, CDP, will be chosen once you better understand what's happening in your supply chain and what is your role in this supply chain. And so based on where you are, a cutter, trader, a jeweler, you won't have the same impact and your actions won't be the same. And this is a discussion that will happen with the panel today. So for example, in the supply chain closer to the mine, it's really about labor, logistics, how would you manage resources, but then when you switch to the manufacturing part, it's more about process, about efficiency. And those don't really mean the same thing. So today, I'm very lucky to have a wonderful group of panelists that will discuss three aspects of ESG in the supply chain: traceability, impact analysis, and ESG initiative. And then we can start with you, Aaron. We will start with introducing the panel, and then I will switch with the first question to Aaron. So, Reid, you want to introduce yourself, then we'll move to Aaron and Marcelo?
Okay. My name is Galopim Carvalho. I'm the Master of Ceremonies. I'm here using my hat as the Vice President of the CIBJO Coral Commission and the CIBJO Vice President of CIBJO Sector A. So that's my hat today.
I'm Aaron Palke, Senior Manager of Research at GIA. I focus a lot on colored stones. I do a lot of work with origin and treatments of stones. I work closely with the Identification Laboratory, which is issuing reports to all the stones that you all move around the trade. So pleased to be here.
Good evening, Marcelo Ribeiro, CEO of Belmont Emerald Mining Brazil. I'm a mine engineer and have been my whole life mining gemstones.
Fantastic. So what we will discuss is traceability, impact analysis, and initiatives, ESG initiatives at the mine level. So we'll start with traceability. So Aaron, can you share more about the work that GIA is doing on traceability of colored stone?
Yeah, so I think actually in a lot of ways the Gemstone Laboratory is not necessarily the best positioned institution to really kind of ensure traceability, because when you think about it, for the most part, when GIA sees a stone that's made its way from the mine, somebody mined it, then somebody sold it, and then somebody faceted it, and then potentially they put in a piece of jewelry. There's a lot of steps along this process, but GIA really only sees this stone for a very narrow window of time during this whole process. And so it's very hard when you're only seeing the stone once along that whole process to kind of really do anything about traceability. But that being said, I think you could say that, unless you're some institution that is controlling your whole supply chain from mine to market, traceability is really kind of it's going to have to be a group effort, I think. No one single institution can really enforce the whole thing. So in that regard, I think you could say that GIA does have an important role to play in traceability by simply providing information about being stones and about being an independent and objective arbiter for providing information about stones. So more specifically, one of the important things we do is, of course, origin reporting. And now there's been a lot of discussion about how origin should be influencing stones in the trade and how it should be reported and this sort of stuff. But I think it's obviously, nonetheless, obvious that origin is an important part of the stones we have in the trade. And so simply by giving information about the stones, where they came from, could be a part of the traceability process. Now, again, another caveat to that is that even though we can identify the origin of a stone, that doesn't tell you anything about where it came from in the beginning. So if we have a Burmese ruby, we can identify a Burmese ruby. It could have come from a few years ago, or it could have come from 10 years ago when the United States had in the United States we had a ban on the import of Burmese rubies. So we can't tell you on which side of the dividing line that stone came from, or it could have come from 120 years ago when it was mined by the British. So identifying the stone as a Burmese ruby doesn't really tell us that much about it in terms of the whole mine to market process. But that being said, origin identification is an important part, I think, there. One more thing I guess we could mention is a service that we've kind of been quietly offering for a while now is this report we call the Colorstone Origin and Traceability Report, in which a stone is submitted to GIA more than once. So we gain a little bit more of that window of the traceability of the stone by seeing it more than once. We would look at the stone in the rough form. The stone would be submitted with some kind of a documentation of how the stone was sourced from the mine it was sourced from, et cetera, et cetera. And then we would see the stone again after it had been polished. The report has photos of the stone in the rough and the polished form and some sort of a statement about the documentation that was provided for the stone. So it's in some ways a kind of a consumer-looking report in which the consumer gets more of a view into the whole process of the mine to market. And so that's one way in which we're working a little more towards gaining a little bit more of a handle on traceability from the gemological laboratories.
Fantastic. And if we continue to the mine side, what does increased traceability mean for you, for example, at Belmont Mines?
Yes, we've been mining emeralds for 45 years. And I'm there, although I was born in the mine, really working with emeralds for 22 years. When I first heard the word sustainability, I said, yeah, cool, we're doing something sustainable at Belmont. It was a kind of way of doing things since my grandfather. So it was never to sell stones, really. The stones emeralds was being sold by its beauty, by the quality since the beginning. So by doing that, having what is so called and then with the conscious and be involving in the sustainability, when the traceability comes, we've increased the transparency in the chain, and it brought more trust to the consumers and to our customers, to the jewelers, confidence, and at the end of the day, I have to say, it's bringing more interest to our stones.
And now let's continue to the other side of the supply chain after the mine. Do you see more appetite for ESG on the other side? And can you share more about the CIBJO greenhouse gas measurement tool, so focused on impact? And I think you have slides to show.
Yes, I do have a few slides.
So,
I will be sitting here. Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Yes, I do see some more appetite, not only by the stakeholders, but also by people relying on the stakeholders to deliver the right message and to deliver the right values. I think it's just pressing the button. Okay. We all know the United Nations Sustainable Goals, and we all know also that among our gem materials, some are biogenic, pearls, tortoise shell, and coral. They are biogenic gem materials, and when they are marine gem materials, they might be affected, and they are potentially affected by ocean acidification, global warming, climate change, etc. And within CIBJO Coral Commission, under the leadership of ICA member Enzo Liverino, we started to realize that when people think about coral in jewelry, like on those beautiful bracelet and a pair of earrings with Mediterranean and Japanese coral, people usually start to think, well, coral jewelry, but coral is life. And coral comes from the coral reefs. And we all know that coral reefs are being affected by all those perils of global warming, etc. And they start to bleach, they start to change, and eventually they die. So, and people don't realize that corals that we use in jewelry are actually corals that don't live on the same ecosystem as the reefs. They live in much deeper waters. They are fished under 50 meters, so they have nothing to do with this. Nevertheless, when the consumers see on the media reports like this one, that corals are under threat, they immediately make a relationship with precious corals, which there is no relation whatsoever. But still, in our community in CIBJO, we thought that if climate change is actually affecting biogenic gem materials, we should do the right thing, not because of the products, but because of our species and our planet, to become carbon neutral so we don't contribute to greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, so we don't warm up the planet. And CIBJO introduced a few years ago this initiative that basically it's an initiative to sensibilize our stakeholders, our colleagues, our companies, that they should acknowledge, measure, and then take action on this particular carbon thing. And this is following the 13 goal of the United Nations Sustainable Values. And acknowledging means doing what I'm trying to do right now, which is making you aware that you have companies, you have businesses, even in your private lives, you have a carbon impact. Why don't you actually think that, okay, I have a carbon impact, how can I measure it? And there are many companies on the trade that can help you yourself as a private family and your companies to measure your carbon impact. There are various metrics that they use to measure your car fleet, how you travel, how you commute, what kind of plastics and papers you use, the energy, the kind of windows, the illumination, air conditioning. There are so many aspects of measuring. And then you can take action. Taking action means you measure and then you buy the carbon credits. And this is what Enzo Liverino, that actually should be here today, and he couldn't for his own reasons and for health reasons, so he cannot travel. And he has been doing this for many years. He measures and then he pays the carbon credits and tries to inspire everyone to become carbon neutral. So if you are involved in the jewelry trade, promoting and selling biogenic gem materials like natural pearls, cultured pearls, corals, you can make a promise of sustainability because you are also doing the right thing on that respect. And that was my contribution.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. And so now going back to traceability and sustainability, Aaron, how do you see traceability fostering or furthering sustainability? How do you see the two linked?
Well, traceability is about information, right? So it's about preserving information along the supply chain as much as possible. And I think information is power, right? So I think that's probably that's the connection there is, in order to make decisions related to sustainability, we have to have information. We have to know where the stones came from, how they were fashioned, who they were fashioned by, where they went, how they were exported from the country, how they were imported into other countries. Information is really what's necessary, I think, for consumers, and not just consumers, but for everybody in the trade to make decisions about how they're sourcing their stones and how they're dealing with the stones. So from consumers to jewelry houses to people just dealing with stones every day, having that information about traceability is really key to making good and responsible decisions in the ESG realm.
And so once we have this understanding of where the gem comes from, can you share more about the initiatives, the ESG initiatives that you have not only done, but Elle would be very happy. It's on your website. So they do exist.
Yes, if you go to Google and you get an image of Belmont today, you're going to see there is a river just in front of the mine. And this river is not black, full of rejects and mud and waste from the mining activity. And we've been mining for 45 years. When my grandfather started back there, he had the conscience that there was a community around and everybody lived from their water. So if he just sent everything, because the process of mining the emeralds, we need to wash the ore, what comes out from the mine, to screen it, and then it creates a tailing. So since that time, we were treating that tailing not to destroy the water stream, and there was completely no law, environmental law in Brazil in that time. This was his conscience saying that I said there was people living out of the water. Today, if you go there, you're going to see people fishing during the weekend the same river, and yet it's right by the mine. So in 2009, I was first time called on PANU Congress to talk about sustainable mining practices. And I talk about the water treatment, I talk about reforestation. We had a very nice program to release birds that were arrested. People was having these birds in the cages and the police used to take them. And we had a program to release these birds in the nature again. So it was many different activities, initiatives that we had back there, and that is evolving all the time. As our consciousness and as our knowledge about what is really the trend, the need for the environment, that we used to think more local, and now we are thinking global when we just say about being carbon neutral. So we are doing now, my favorite projects that we are doing at this moment, One is about carbon. So we all gonna move, and the society is moving towards carbon zero. So the first initiative of Belmont was to become carbon neutral. So we have 2,000 hectares of forest that we preserve, and we are now reforestating some degraded areas of old farms that the group, Belmont Group, had. We also work with agriculture. So a long time ago, we bought farms for agriculture, and we're now reforestating this. By the end of the year, we are going to have 3,000 hectares of forests. And we are adding to the mine. So again, it's going to be a nice picture in the near future. We are installing already. We are going to have, we are building now 1.5 megawatt power plant. It's a solar power plant. So Belmont mine is going to run completely on renewable energy by our own solar power plant. So these are initiatives to go towards zero emissions, and you're going to, of course, stay still, although we are neutral, we are going to be completely zero emissions. We're going to need the technology development for some big machines we have. Now in the underground, Belmont, we have everything electric, but the shovels, but the drill holes, the drill machines, the jumbos are all electric, trying to have the use. And this is very nice, that was said in the presentation before by El Hill. This is a kind of economically sustainable, matching the environmental sustainable. Because when I say we are going to have our own energy, we are not subject to the fluctuation of the price of the energy, there is a huge investment now, but we are looking always for long term. So another initiative that I really like, project that I really like is, you know, we have the war in Russia now and Ukraine, and Brazil is very dependent of the fertilizer being important for Russia. And we are an agriculture country. We produce a lot of commodities, agricultural commodities, and it's been a problem to import these fertilizers, which is basically potash. So we knew, our geologists talking, brainstorming, we knew our ore, the same rock that contains emerald, contains 5% of potash. And you say, well, why don't we go further in these studies? And after the process of crushing and screening and washing, at the end of the day, you have a reject, which is a kind of sand, which is even enriched in potash because some of the quartz went away in bigger sizes, and we got about 5 to 7% of potash. And we got an agreement with a university in Ribeiro. We have a nice center there, and we started developing it. And it was easy for us, as our group works with agriculture as well. We sent 100 trucks to the farm, and we got a corn plantation with all the studies and techniques to see how good would be measuring using our material comparing to the Russian potash chloride that we import, which is a salt. And it's very important for the agriculture, but the salt goes away very fast. It's very soluble. So you need to put a lot, you really enrich the land a lot, but also it goes away very fast. And now it stays longer, although it's poor in potash. So it's a good balance, actually. It's a reduction in the use of the chloride, potash chloride from Russia, and it's sourced locally. Again, we have the economically sustainable activity doing, because what would be for us a cost becomes a revenue eventually. And at least in our farms nowadays, we're not anymore spending as much as we used to. And also sustainable because we always are environmentally sustainable, because we have to use the waste piles to pile this waste that had no use before. So these two projects are going on right now. We like was told here also, we work first, we say later, because it's something that we really care about the image of not greenwashing anything, but other activities we are doing at the moment.
And building on what you just said about carbon neutrality and the tools that you mentioned, Rui, do you see appetite for measuring greenhouse gas emissions, or even more ambition, like reaching carbon neutrality?
Yes, I think examples like what Marcelo just shared with all of us, I think they are the inspiration that this can be done even in an economically positive way. We need more examples like Marcelo's, and we need more communication so everyone in the room and all the businesses in our industry can see that colleagues or our partners, they are doing it. And can I ask the audience who actually measures the carbon in your own businesses here in the... Okay, we have one business there, two businesses. So we have three businesses, four businesses here at the...
5.
No, counting on you. I was
And
counting on
5
you.
years.
5 businesses here that actually measure the carbon impact. But I'm sure that many of you acknowledge that you have a carbon impact and that there are emissions associated with the activity, right? So I think the next step will be measuring, investing some of your capital, investing in measuring, and then looking at Marcelo's example, at the Belmont mine's example, and seeing that it can be done in an economically sustainable way. And then you can do the right thing and you communicate that you are doing the right thing in a very positive way. So yes, I see the concern on the effects. I don't actually see the concern about doing something because people have no idea of what should they do, and does it involve a lot of manpower, a lot of people that they have to hire to do that kind of work. It depends on the size of the company, but what I see, yes, is the concern of the results of climate change, of global warming, etc. But I don't see people taking action because they don't know what to do. And this is why examples like Belmont should be more communicated, in not only in the trade media, but also in other types of media, so at least people get inspired.
And building on this idea of data and echoing what you said previously, Aaron, about knowledge is power, on the other side of the spectrum, how do customers react to the report? Any surprise or any...
Well, the origin reports are quite popular from the laboratory. I mean, I think that's just because consumers want to know this information. And I think of like an example I can think of. It's not just with gemstones either, right? Origin is important everywhere. I was in the grocery store the other day, and we have this term in the lab, COO, for our reports, which is country of origin. That's what we say in the lab. Can I get a coup opinion if you're handing a stone to someone for an opinion, which means country of origin. And I saw this in the store. It was coup on everything. It was like the watermelon coup from Mexico, and so people care about origin just in general, I think. So the origin reports are quite popular from the laboratory, and we're also seeing some favorable feedback on those traceability reports I mentioned, which we have kind of quietly launched as well. And again, that's more of just simply giving consumers more information, and that was really in large part what that report was generated for, was to find some way to provide more information to the end consumer. They have some documentation. They can see this is what the stone looked like before it was cut. This is some information about how it was sourced, and so it's just a little bit more of the whole kind of
story,
supply chain to the consumer. Yeah.
And continuing on data, so and echoing what Elle said in the previous presentation, how do you measure progress and how do you communicate progress on your initiatives?
We've been measuring and everything's about the data that you measure, like who was saying about the carbon emissions. For example, we come to points that we accomplish some things. 100% of our tailings are being treated, effluents. 100% of our waste is being sent to recycle units. 100% of the degraded areas are completely reforested. But some other data that we communicate with the society, it's very important also to have the idea of the importance of the mining activity. I love the presentation of Sean Gilbertson yesterday from Gemfields that was talking about how much money is going to the public governments about the mining activity, for example. We have 30%. 30% of whatever income Belmont has go to the public government. And this is interesting because in addition to that, for example, we have 100% of our employees with private Health insurance. In our city, it's a mining city. Belmont is the second largest taxpayer. There is another one, there's a big iron ore company. So because of that, 75% of the entire city has private health insurance. We take the pressure out of the public one, which is being able to have a better assistance for those who doesn't have. So all this communication with the society, because the impact is one after another. You have also everything that everybody expects from a sustainable operation, which is environmentally talking.
Yeah.
But you have the social, which comes after. And there are a lot of numbers that people are not very aware of it. So this is a big effort to communicate mainly with the society around, which is the people that supports us. Because we are there because everybody wants us there. Otherwise, we would not be anymore. Mining is an activity that is very bad-mouthed and has not a good reputation all over. And if we don't tell and explain how good the business and the activity is, no one buying a nice stone in Place Vendôme in Paris knows exactly what comes from. How many families down in Brazil, in Zambia, in Madagascar, everywhere living out of this activity. For how many hands one stone goes up to that window. And these are numbers that we have to always bring in addition to everything we bring in terms of the environment numbers.
That's a very good point. And I just saw a presentation yesterday on a mine that was actually net positive, which is mind-blowing when you think about a mine. So there are things that can be done. And maybe one last question before moving to the question is, for each of you will be the same question. What do you see as the biggest challenge that you're experiencing in your part of the supply chain? So maybe starting with you, Marcelo, and then with
Yes,
Aaron.
when I talk about mining, gemstone mining, every gemstone mine was artisanal at a time, at a point of time. Mostly started artisanal. So if you have the mindset of not sending your reject to the water at the beginning, or if later on you get this information, education, you start slowly and you can go implementing everything. Of course, installing a power plant, it's something that demands investment, although it's cost effective. But most of the sustainable activities are doable. And you can do, once you change the mindset, you understand that you can do it, not just go against the flow. Because everyone that knows Brazilian gemstone mines know that the ones that are not with the compliance nowadays are not operating anymore. The society doesn't want them. So if you want to be desired, you know, a business that everybody wants you to be there, you need to start to change the mindset. So it's possible, slowly, baby steps, and changing the mindset.
This is a good one. It's possible. It's a good one.
From the lab's standpoint, in terms of the supply chain mine to market, the biggest challenge I have is getting the origin right on the reports. But beyond that, I think the other challenge, I think for us especially, is communicating. And, you know, as Wim mentioned yesterday in his talk on field gemology, a lot of what he's doing with field gemology is telling the story of how these stones are produced from the earth, who's mining these stones, and how they're getting from the mine to the market, and what's happening from there on. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges, where we can contribute to this whole thing, is telling the story, and especially when we are presenting all this information in field reports in our journal, Gems and Gemology, and other places, in other publications. We're really trying to help give data to consumers, people who are going to be buying these stones, so they can know when the report says Madagascar for the sapphire, who is buying those sapphires in Madagascar, where are these stones coming from? And I think that's really an important part that we can also play in this whole transparency objective for the gem trade.
And my opinion, I agree with Marcelo, is changing the mindset. People hardly think that why should I measure? They don't even think about carbon impact. So changing the mindset is, I think, it's the most important challenge. And one thing that, and communicating, and one thing that can be done for the newer generations of people in our trade is in the major gemological education organizations like the GIA, for example, include structured information on these topics. So that people that finish the GG or the FGA or other degrees in education, they at least have to think about it as something that if they want to have a business, they should consider those as important. So I would say mindset, awareness, and communication.
Yeah, and you're right that there is a demand from a younger generation, as we saw on the data shared by the Plum Club. So we left some time for questions. The panelists and I are happy to answer any question on ESG implementation in the supply chain.
L. It's always L.
Journey, I think some specifics about the parts that were a surprise to you. Oh, we're going to need a special tool to measure something, or I don't know. Can you share with us any part of your experience where you thought that something was going to be more straightforward and then realized, wait, there's more that we have to do before we can even get there?
Great question.
Tell you, the opposite happens more often. That we always think everything is very complicated, and at the end of the day, it's not so complicated. Once somebody told me, Marcelo, there is a part of the mine that we're gonna have to cut the trees, and the fauna there, or the animals, gonna go from that area to another area. So you need to follow them. You need to, know how many animals are, and what species are there. I said, oh my God, how am I gonna do that? And they say, no, there are some ways we can put some traps there and cameras at night that they go, we take picture of them. And okay, there are people that know, and we don't know everything. And when they start doing it, and I saw the reports, I say, wow, that's so nice. That we want even to do more and to know how many animals and things that we didn't know there was around us. So most of the time, I would say it's the opposite. People are very, I really don't remember an example that was really scaring me to the compliance. Carbon is really, really a challenge, being carbon free, because we need the development of the technology. So when you see the European Union talking about in 2035, we are not going to sell any more cars with fossil fuel. It's a bit scary because we know from the mining industry how much minerals and metals, lithium, we need to supply this. So, okay, there's somebody should be making this calculation, but these are more challenging. What is being challenged for the whole world? But most of the time is the opposite. Most of the time, don't be scary. There is a way. Somebody's doing because it's doable.
Hi, my name is Rita. I head Amazon's jewelry business. I found your panel very interesting. Aaron, I have a question for you. Have you considered blockchain technology as a tool to trace stones? And if you don't think it's the GIA's responsibility to do so, who along the supply chain do you think should take that huge responsibility in this space? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we've looked into. Now, I think one of the major challenges with the blockchain is how the data is input and making sure that it's input properly along every step of the way. And so that's one reason in which GIA has a hard time kind of controlling that, because we can't really be there at every step of the way. Like I said, we're really seeing the stone when it comes into us for a very short window of time. I think blockchain definitely has its place as a solution potentially for some of the for preserving traceability and preserving information on these stones. So it's something I think would be great to see implemented by somebody along the supply chain. But it's going to take cooperation, and I think that's one of the main things here is, GI can play our part, but we have to work with others, and everybody has to get along board and decide that it's important to be preserving this information. And I think for blockchain to work, that's what you would really need.
Can I add something?
Of course.
Can I add something to the blockchain system is as good as the stakeholders that control it. So although it might be good for tracing from mine to market, I think it's probably more adequate, or at least more feasible, to do an inverse blockchain from market to mine if you want to create a positive impact. For example, you sell a ruby at retail level, then you can allocate a certain part of that revenue to a certain community to help a certain project, a hospital, a school, or something. And then, because blockchain traces transactions, the consumer can actually see that his money was actually going to that place. So this inverse blockchain, I don't know why never people thought about it. From mine to market, you are dependent with the people that are controlling the transactions. But if it is only financial, it's much more transparent, and it's much more easy to trace those whatever little amounts from the sales point to the communities, and then you can create a positive impact, and you can actually see that you are doing the right thing. I understand that country of origin is important, as the COO that Aaron was making, but if you do it the other way around, you will give the consumer the power to control who they want to support, and I think it can be a solution.
Thank you. We have time for one more. That was a slow clap. Thank you so much.